their belief. I mean, you know, if they just have like, if they named their cat Isis and they have some crystals or whatever, and they try to use that as a way of manifesting spiritual authority, the astral plane might not look so favorably on someone who, you know, affected the symbols that they were trying to use in that sort of way. But it's a very concrete question. And really the question of authority is there in all ceremonial magic. I mean, Thelema is supposed to be about the authority of the individual. So really, your imperative for this comes from your true will and your holy guardian angel in that system. And, well, the angel until the crossing of the abyss experience, and then it's completely the individual. But even so, I find that if someone, I mean, true will is a difficult thing to get very clearly down. I mean, it's not something you figure out in a weekend. It takes time, and like the transgressing of one's values, like the evolution of one's personal beliefs, it's sort of an endless process of trying to figure out exactly where I am, what am I supposed to do, what's the right move, you know what I mean? And the question would be then, that's a good test of how close is the Thelemite to their own true will. Are they capable of using that, invoking that spiritual authority, and using that as a way of controlling the spirit and commanding the spirit, or do they have to rely on external sources to get anything done? And I think there's no harm in doing that. I would be very surprised if someone sort of was very new to Thelema or new to the occult and they tried to use that as a source of authority. I think you probably have to go through the regular channels, and that makes more sense. That kind of thing takes time to build. It's also good to, what I would recommend is if someone does get a spirit that shows up and they can confirm the spirit's identity, probably the best thing to do, particularly in working with the Goetia, because they have little quirks, like I said, they're individuals, they're very individualistic creatures, they will relate to the magician as an individual. So one of the best questions to ask is, you know, so what's the best way to get in touch with you again? Like, what do you like? You know, name some things that you like to have around, or like something I should add here. Is there something I should be saying or something I should be doing that will help this work better the next time? And then you sort of can evolve the practice specifically suited to working with that individual spirit. And I think that that's very important to do, as long as it doesn't involve chucking out any of the basic rules of the system, which are pretty clearly outlined in the Lesser Key.
So if I could again ask, when did you first start all your work in magic?
All my work, 1998.
So it's been a lot of years.
Yeah. I'm older than I look.
You're doing something.
Yeah.
I found your ideas about American politics interesting. It's interesting to see how people in other countries look at America. Unfortunately, if anybody runs for president in America, if they don't declare themselves a believer, they will not have a prayer.
Oh no, I see that.
Because atheists are the least trusted population in America.
Yeah, and what's the voting percentage too? I mean, I think this was it's interesting to see how that political dynamic changed when Reagan came into office, because pre-Reagan, fundamentalist Christian churches were telling their worshipers not to vote, to stay away from the political system, was corrupt. Ronald Reagan made a deal with Ralph Reed from the Christian Coalition and said, okay, I will support your ideas and put them in my platform. Then all of a sudden what you got was a bunch of churches telling people who had never voted in their lives before, go out and vote for Ronald Reagan.
Right.
So that's why he won by a landslide, and why people didn't see it coming, because this wasn't a demographic they were used to paying attention to. And I think in a weird way you also saw it happen with Obama as well. Like, you had a lot of young people who hadn't voted before get excited about him, and then they came out and voted. And
Well, they really pushed for that.
Yeah.
But the other thing that happened right during that time with Reagan is Jerry Falwell and some of these other wacko funny Christians started raising money for their local political campaigns, and they started at the local level, the grassroots level, you know. And he had this plan, and he carried it out. And him and Pat Robertson and all the other wackos were working together to get the school boards full of funny Christians, and then they worked on the mayors and just, you know, local government, and then they just kept moving up from there.
Yeah.
Pretty soon you had, you know, fundamentalist governors and senators, and then you wound up with Michelle Bachmann and speaking of complete whack jobs.
Yeah.
It's just amazing the number of people that are in our government now that you just, every time I open up the paper, I just think I'm living in the idiocracy.
Yeah.
I'm living the movie.
Well, what I think though, I do find that to be impressive, on a sense. I mean, we can argue that it's a terrible thing, which, it is,
Yeah, it is
demonstrably. But what you do have is a group of people who are very motivated to create a political change that they wanted to see happen.
And they did.
Yeah,
Yes,
and that's
they did.
impressive in and of itself. I mean, I think that one thing to look at, one thing that I always look at when I look at religious organizations is like, how effective are they? I mean, compare them to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church probably has a lot more money, but it's losing ground and losing ground and losing ground all over the place.
Yeah, now they're picking on the nuns.
Yeah.
The only people that are actually doing the charitable work, now they're picking on them.
Yeah. No, but it's interesting to watch that dynamic, and the question is, whether you agree with the end goal of a religious organization. I do like to look at the things that make them effective at doing what they're setting out to do, because I think that's very important to pay attention to. Because, like I said, if we have competing values to these, and we want to see these values overthrown, that's not going to happen by people just kind of resting back and saying, okay, well, those guys are wrong. You shouldn't be interfering with the system like that. No, the answer is to interfere with the system
Yes.
back, because
Yes.
otherwise they just take it
Yes.
over. Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do at a local level with the local atheist groups. But where I live, there's just not enough of them.
Yeah.
There's not enough of us to make a difference where I live. We are being overpowered by the fundy Christians.
Where about you?
Pardon me?
They have a bigger cover.
Yes, they have a much bigger cover. And I'm from California originally, and when I lived there, it was liberal, and now it's become a real conservative, fundamentalist state. And I don't even want to go back there. I go back there to visit my family, and then I don't know which is worse, living in the Bible Belt or going back to California.
I think this is an interesting idea. I like to look at this in context of the idea of, that we see, okay, so Satan is worshipped as Jesus Christ. Well, let's look at these churches, for example, like, are they really serving Christian goals or are they not? I mean, I think they're probably turning more, and they're turning a generation of people against Jesus and against God because they use the Bible as a stick to beat them with and tell them they should be hating themselves. I mean, does that serve, whose interest does that serve? I mean, they might have Jesus on the wall, but Satan's supposed to be the prince of lies as well, so maybe you don't expect him to go by his real name. He's going to have someone else's picture in his ID. It's a fake ID anyway.
Of course. That's a good point. I think the more the population of right-wingers grows, the more the population of people who are disillusioned
Yeah.
and pissed off at them.
And the thing is, people don't realize what they're actually pissed off at
Yeah.
isn't really the essence of the religion itself. I mean, I have many deep-seated problems with Christianity, but I do make a distinction between what's actually Christianity and what is preached as
Absolutely.
Christianity. As my problems with one are over here, and my problems with the other are way over here, and they're two separate things, really.
Well, Jesus is okay. It's his followers that scare the hell out of me.
Well, Jesus is okay to an extent. I mean, the reason that Crowley said, or Iwas says, I peck out his eyes, like I said, is the problem of the idea of self-sacrifice, because that flies in the face of individualism,
Right.
and Nietzsche really identifies that as the root of slave morality. It's like if you
Yeah.
have someone who you want to be a good slave, you want them to jump in front of whatever's going to get, if there's a bullet coming at you, you want them to think it's a good thing to get in front of it.
But that was his choice. And Crowley also said, and the slave shall serve.
Yeah.
And that's what he was talking about. It's a choice.
Yeah, they have a role in the system too. I mean,
Exactly.
and this is where I would make the distinction, because the Book of the Law says, the slave shall serve, but it also says, we have nothing to do with the outcast and the unfit. And I think that for some people that line blurs, or they think of someone who is an outcast and put them in a slave situation. I don't think that that's true,
Right.
because someone who's unfit is not going to be a useful slave to
Right.
me.
Absolutely.
They're not be able to do the things they want them to do, so that's why you have nothing to do with them at all. As opposed to a slave who you want to find work for them to do.
Absolutely. Put them to work.
And this is,
They
keep
wanna
them
work,
out of
put 'em
trouble.
to
Like,
work.
Politicians.
I'm a natural dominatrix. If somebody
Yeah.
comes up to me and wants to serve me, I've got work for you.